Hello, all, and welcome back to a new episode of Movies and Us, a weekly gathering place filled with conversations about movies, stories, and connection. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And today we are going to be reviewing the film The Brutalist. Sarah, going to kick us off with an IMDb summary for this film.
Sure. When a visionary architect and his wife flee post-war Europe in 1947 to rebuild their legacy and witness the birth of modern United States, their lives are changed forever by a mysterious, wealthy client.
All right. So in Movies and Us tradition, we're going to start off with our one-sentence summaries. Sarah, what is yours for The Brutalist?
Mine is, some building projects will be the death of you.
Ah! Wear your hard hats, people.
Honestly, though,
you will be
get
physically
ready.
and emotionally and mentally just taken out, by anything, anyone. Yeah. Like a rod of steel might hit you, or just like the oppressive forces of America, you never know. One of them can come swinging in your direction.
Or both.
Or both.
Might be a double whammy type situation.
Yeah, no one is safe.
No one
is safe out here.
Nope. That's why we wear our hard hats.
Yes, indeed. Okay. My one-sentence summary is being an immigrant in America is brutal.
Yeah. Nailed it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's dive in and share our high-level thoughts about The Brutalist. We won't spoil this movie yet. There's 3.5 hours to spoil, so we're not going to do that quite yet. So do you want to share your thoughts about how this film landed for you, Sarah?
Yeah. This film is a lot. It is, like we said, 3.5 hours long. And there's a lot in here. It's very densely packed. There's a lot going on with these characters as this film follows them through their lives. I think for me, it almost is like the law of diminishing returns. I was really engaged in this film for the first half. And then after the intermission, there were some things where I found myself less engaged in what was going on and really feeling kind of like worn down and fatigued by the film and like maybe less willing to follow it to some of the places that it wants to go, even though it's very well done and some of the topics that it covers are very interesting. The longer that this movie went on, the more disengaged I found myself becoming, which I thought was really interesting. But from a technical aspect, it's very, very good. One of my favorite things is the score, and I was just captivated by the score. And performances are great. The directing is just at times very beautiful, at times absolutely horrific. So there's a lot of really good things in this film. I don't know if it's because of the story or because of the length of the runtime or what, but I definitely found myself after the intermission being like, oh gosh, when is this going to be over? So kind of, I don't know how to talk about this film either. Like we just talked about Nickel Boys and I didn't know how to talk about that film either. And now here we're back again with The Brutalist. I'm in kind of the same pickle of it's so well done from a technical aspect, and yet I at times struggle to connect with it. So I'm not really sure what to do with this film. What about you?
This episode's just going to be you and I sitting here being like, we don't know what to do with this, but there's something important here that's very necessary to engage with. Yeah, I think you might have had a more engaged time with this film than I did. I found this film really difficult to get invested in, but I was really trying. And like you mentioned, there's so much good here. There's so much that's important, and it's an incredible story to tell and put to the big screen. I just wonder if truly the length is working against it, because there's a punchiness and a momentum that I didn't feel with this film. And I don't know, I found myself like feeling emotionally exhausted by this movie in a way that is not because of the subject matter, but more of the pacing. So I really think that this could have been an incredible journey of a film to experience had they really just had a little bit more restraint and allowed for some of those moments to move and have legs a little bit more. And knowing the 3 hour and a half journey that we're about to go on, I think there's constantly scenes and moments and sequences in this movie where I was trying to really think about, like, man, how could we have trimmed the fat to have gotten the same emotional effect, the same information, the same context that needed to be given to the audience, but we're just, moving quickly through the film. So yeah, I it's so hard too because the subject matter around the immigrant experience of being an American and trying to navigate what the forces in America look like at this time is so important to share and to have audiences buy in. But if they're looking to really drive engagement from a wide swath of people, I don't think this film is most strategic in being able to do that. So yeah, I feel conflicted about this film, and I think we'll talk through a little bit about what could have made this better for us personally. Like maybe somebody really engaged heavily with this, but I found this a little bit challenging. I was actually thinking a lot about putting The Brutalist in conversation with Oppenheimer, which I think is an interesting like thought exercise around them both being quite long movies, covering some like big subject matter and being pretty heady in its presentation. And yet Oppenheimer clearly has captivated audiences and has sparked a lot of energy instead of kind of being a difficult experience to get through.
Yeah, I that makes me feel better because I did feel fatigued by this
Oh,
film.
I was fatigued from like minute 30. Oh. So I think you did better than I did from what it sounds like.
Yeah, I think I was more maybe willing to, like, go along and, like I maybe there was, like, some weird hopefulness in this for me of, like, maybe this 3.5 hour experience will be worth it. But yeah, man, this movie in a lot of ways kind of feels like a slog, which is not how you want to feel while watching a movie, but I do think it's a really important film and it's very well made. And so I don't know if it's probably a combination of a lot of things, but I think it is too long, number 1. And then maybe there could have been something else with the writing. Like, I did find myself, like, obviously I'm rooting for Laszlo, but it's just because I'm supposed to. And I struggled to feel I struggled to feel like I knew him as a character.
Yeah.
I didn't
Mhm.
really know what drives him. Obviously, like, he wants his wife to come and visit. He is this brilliant architect, but that's kind of it. And there's I don't know, maybe there it's I think I maybe needed more from his character to be a little bit more invested in to go through this, 3.5 hour long experience with him. So I wonder if he was maybe written a little bit differently and it was shorter, if this would maybe be a little bit more effective all around.
I think that's a really fabulous point, which is it's of course the pacing, which I think is kind of obvious based on its length, but you're right, the efficiency of character investment and the way that this character is written, allowing us to have space to go into the interior life of this character while also seeing him kind of in these in the public stage and around others is a big part of, I think, what would drive our like emotional and cognitive investment in this film, which is really feeding my the Brutalist versus Oppenheimer comparison thought exercise because Oppenheimer does an incredible job of showcasing this person's multifaceted dimensions and how he shows up differently in all of these different worlds and allowing us to have that time and space to breathe with him as he's alone, as he's with his wife, as he's with his mistress, as he's with his scientist crew, and then also with the reporters and the public. Like, he's just so dynamic in that way. And we see all these different sides of him coming out in these different contexts. And when there's dissonance there, it's also interesting too for us to tease that apart in our minds and really get invested in who he is. So I do think that you're right. From the beginning, Laszlo's character feels like there's a distance between us and him as a viewer and as his character is navigating this world. So perhaps some more time at the beginning to get us to really deeply connect with him then would be the springboard for the rest of our 3-hour journey, which I actually think that if the character's written more effectively, we as audiences like are down to go on a long journey, as long as the investment's there. So like the length of journey is directly proportional to the amount of character investment that we have. You think about a film like The Irishman, which is also so long. I think it's also like 3.5 hours long.
Yeah.
And no part of that movie feels long. I'm like, it's too short. We needed more time with Russ and this whole crew. And so, yeah, the characters writing and how strong they are, I think is a really fabulous point that you've raised.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's almost there too, like, I don't know, there's because I was rooting for him, and there are these, like, moments, I think especially when we first see him designing, where I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes, I am rooting for you, I want, like, such good things for you," and then obviously there are things that come in that complicate his character and make him, not this, like, perfect hero, which is great, we love flawed characters, but it's I don't know, there's almost a distance there that kept me from maybe fully engaging in this the way that I wanted to, and I feel like you need to for a 3.5 hour long film.
Yeah, you
It's so
definitely need that.
long.
So long. Yeah. Okay, well, let's give a spoiler alert. So, if you haven't seen The Brutalist yet, it is available out in theaters when you can find 4 hours of your day, experience this movie. It's definitely very much in conversation and high on the list in the awards race as well. So, if you're invested in that, go watch this movie before listening to the rest of our conversation. All right. Where shall we dive into next? What do you think?
I don't even
There's so
know.
much.
Like, where do you again, this is a 3.5 hour long movie. Where do we start?
Yeah. Can we start with the ending? I feel like we have a
Yeah,
lot to say about the ending.
let's go.
Well, there's, I guess, two endings in a way. There's the ending of the 1950s, 60s story, and then there's the denouement epilogue sequence. Let's maybe start with the epilogue sequence because I think the inclusion of any epilogue denouement moment is always really fascinating because it is truly so not necessary a lot of times, but sometimes the inclusion of them adds such color to the thesis and framing of the rest of the film. So I always love looking at and analyzing the denouement sequences because they literally color the rest of the movie for you, and what they choose to do with that is always quite significant. So tell me your thoughts about this epilogue sequence.
My thoughts are just confusion, if I'm being completely honest. When we went from 1960 or wherever we were, and then suddenly we're in the 80s and the score is changed, the filmmaking style has changed, the country that we're in has changed. I was so out of place. Like, I felt so discombobulated and confused. And honestly, I struggled to pay attention to anything that was happening in that epilogue because I was so thrown for a loop. And then because it's his niece that's saying all this whole spiel at the end. But I was like, who is this person? Like, I don't I don't know who this is because she doesn't look like her younger self. And I think we see that actress who played her younger self in that scene with old Laszlo. So I was just so confused by all of it. I was like, who is this chick that's talking? What is going on? I'm why are we in the 80s? I don't understand anything. So like I was just confused and missed everything. So I had to like go back and like read the quote of what she had said because I was not in the 80s with them because I was just I don't know where I was, but I was
You
just in
were
confusion land.
You were in 2025, the year of the present, sitting in your theater, just trying to collect all of your brain cells. That's what you were doing.
I was so thrown for a loop, and I really wish, because I had the whole, like, back row to myself, but I
Yeah.
really had wished that there was other people around me that I could, like, look at and see, like, "Are y'all as confused as I am? Why are we in the '80s all of a sudden?
Yeah.
What is going on?"
Yeah. And I think what's interesting too is okay, so one, who is this woman? We've now read the Wikipedia summary. It's okay. It's the niece, which I didn't pick up on either. But the other problem with that is, even knowing who this is, I think it doesn't add emotional weight to that moment. Like, because we have not seen significantly the centerpiece and the dynamics and the impact of the relationship between Laszlo and his niece. Like, she's mentioned, she's in the orbit, she's definitely a part of this story, but oftentimes, at the end of a film when someone's giving a speech about someone who's the main character of the movie, it's the depth of the relationship between the two of them and the journey that we have seen them go through over the whole course of the movie that adds such stakes and weightiness to their words, because we have gone through that and experienced everything with them. And I think that the ending scene felt a little empty to me too, because it is his niece, which I feel like I'm like, did I miss some part of their dynamic that makes this really significant? I actually think it almost would have been more effective for that whole spiel and commentary about him and his life to have like come from a random person, even just like a
Yes. Yeah.
appreciation, an enthusiast about architecture, or someone that was really studied him and was an admirer of him, and then the amount of effort that person took to understand the story of this man who was such a genius but lived through so much, and to explain that to the masses would have been really impactful, because there's now evidence of how much time and effort this random person, stranger, studied about this man because he was so worth studying. And it's kind of this nod to us as the audience of like, your time was worth it because this man was worth so much. And essentially, like, thank you for coming along this journey with us as well to study this man and his life. But there was almost like a suggestion of emotional weight with the niece being the choice that I didn't feel, but this movie seemed to think that I should feel. And that gap in understanding between me and the movie is what makes that ending scene feel a little confusing too.
Yeah, I wish that it had been like a museum curator or like an architect scholar or something, like that. I think that would have worked better for me and been less confusing. The other thing that kept just I don't know, man. It short-circuited my brain is the constant switching of aspect ratios in that with seemingly no reason. And so my brain was just overloaded by that time and was like, okay, I am emotionally done with this film and now I'm confused. I'm ready to leave. Thank you.
Yeah, you've like gathered all of your belongings and are like ready to exit the theater and out into the sunshine and the trees and the wind. Yep.
Mhm. Which is a bummer because there's so much good in this film, and I was like I was along for the ride for
Yeah.
a good chunk of it, and then I wanted to be along for the ride for the second half, but I just got tired and just was struggling, and then that epilogue, just confusion, and that is not the note that I wanted to leave this movie on. And so it's a bummer that all of these important things that are discussed in this epilogue and this like cherry on top of this epic journey of this man's life, which is fascinating and harrowing and complex and all of these things, it didn't pack that punch that I think it was supposed to. Maybe it did for some people, and maybe we're the weirdos, but man, I I don't think that was a way to end this movie.
Yeah, and I think one of my other challenges with the ending, which I'm curious to get your thoughts on, is the choice to end with this final profound quote from his niece. No matter what others say. Oh, no, sorry. No matter what others try and sell you, it is the destination, not the journey. Tell me your thoughts about that or your interpretation of that in the context of the film.
So here's the thing. I am a destination, not the journey gal. Okay? If we go on a road trip, I don't know how to road trip. I'm trying to get from point A to point B. I am a destination gal. But I don't feel like that's the best way to view your life. And so I'm trying to become more of a journey gal instead of just being a destination gal. So that just kind of flies in the face of what I've been trying to, change my whole person to be about. But I think it's just such an interesting way to try and frame this film,
Yeah,
because like what is the destination that he has achieved?
right.
Is it getting these buildings up no matter the cost to yourself and those around you? Is it getting to the US? Is it I don't like what is the destination? I don't know. I think it's just an interesting way to try and frame this, but I again struggled to feel emotionally connected to this, so that line doesn't really have that much meaning to me, or I don't know, to this journey that we just went on for 3.5 hours.
Yeah, yeah. I was really pondering like how to interpret that statement because like you mentioned, we all talk about how it's so easy for us as humans to be so destination focused and not embrace the journey and where it will lead. And the best way I can try and interpret this is that her insinuation is that because the journey has been so painful and has come at such a high cost for this man, and we have experienced all of that over the course of this film, that kind of she's saying like the journey was not was not to be embraced because ultimately like I guess it was worth it because we've reached the destination here. He's made it. He is appreciated. He is celebrated. It's particularly noteworthy that in the beginning of her speech, she talks about how he was principally an artist. And so him finally being able to reach the destination of being able to flourish fully as an artist was the goal. Like that is the goal because the costs along the journey were so great that to have not reached the destination would have been a harder truth to swallow had that ultimate full flourishing not been fully realized, which I think is like the best way I can try and make that make sense in the context of this film and the whole journey that we go on with this movie. But I think that it is also potentially such an easily misinterpreted or misguided statement to make, especially knowing how much we use that phrase and that saying in our context and maybe can easily on the surface seem like an oversimplification when in reality I actually think that the meaning is far more complex, like really counting the costs of what it takes to be great and to pursue your craft in this way is a lot and is not to be forgotten, that the journey is not always easy and in fact incredibly difficult at times. And so but I don't think that lands well. Like there's maybe a different way to say all of that in a more precise and more holistic way than I think what actually ends up coming out of her mouth. And I think because the shot is a close-up shot of her and it's the last thing she says and the movie really builds up to this moment, that I think that line will really reverberate in our minds after the film. And so nailing that full thesis of this movie, I think needed to be a little bit more crisp than it actually was.
And I think I would have liked a little bit more of the film setting that concept up. Obviously it's there, and he is a brilliant artist, and he struggles a lot, and people take advantage of him, and he has to scrap to get by, and he has his own inner demons, and like he pays a price for his art, and his family pays a price for his art. So like all of that is in there, but I don't know. It's all in there. And yet for me it doesn't feel like the film sets up that to be the conclusion of the film, even though all the pieces are there. So I'm not sure how to like fix it and rearrange things to better set up that ending. But if, I don't know, at least for me, like, if this is supposed to make you feel like this, like, triumphant, happy ending, like, I didn't feel that. Again, I just felt fatigued and I felt exhausted leaving this. So I don't know what the film was trying to get me to feel and, like, walk away with. If it I don't know. I don't know if it's supposed to be this, like, reflective yet hopeful note, 'cause I didn't get any of that from this film.
I didn't either, and I wonder if part of the film's maybe objective, in especially in the way that it's tonally set up, is to feel the weight and the exhaustion of it. Because I don't know, I was just making me think about, like, why have this film be so long if not to really, like, have us experience and really walk through just, like, for this character too, how much he has gone through, which, like, I guess successful, like, we definitely feel that by the end of the movie, you know? But perhaps there's more of an aversion and desire to retreat away from it versus engage and lean in and really allow ourselves to feel the weight of all of that. I think that maybe the comparison to Nickel Boys is really interesting and fascinating because we're talking about them back to back, but Nickel Boys is just as horrifying and harrowing, and yet there feels like such an invitation to lean in and to let our hearts be put on the line with these boys and walk through this with them. And with The Brutalist, I felt the, like, desire to retreat and engage and lean back and lean out of the experience. And so what is it about those two films and the way that they're positioned and written and paced that one has such different effects on us, but both cover deeply important and very difficult subject matter, and yet our reactions are very different, you know, and quite contrasting.
So here's an idea. Well, I have two ideas. They might be terrible because I just thought of them. So please give me your feedback. Number one, what if at the end it was Laszlo giving this speech and this, like, self-reflection piece of it as he's looking back on his life? You know, because when we think about The Irishman, for example, I loved that movie. It did not feel too long to me. And I think part of that is because it is the main character reflecting on his life. And obviously, like, Scorsese knows how to pace a film perfectly. And so I think that that reflection was really helpful for me. And I think Nickel Boys has an aspect of that too, where we see the adult Elwood, you know, thinking about his life. So I wonder if this little end epilogue would have been more impactful had it been Laszlo instead of his niece giving it, and maybe would have, you know, brought home some of those concepts of he is deciding for himself. Yeah, it was worth it. And then my second kind of, like, related idea is if his wife did it, you know, because she had to bear
Yeah.
so much of this, and she suffered a lot throughout her life. And so I wonder if her giving this speech and actually saying, yeah, in the end for us, it was worth it. It was a painful journey, but the destination is so beautiful, and I'm so grateful that we went on this. And, you know, I think either of those may have been a little bit more emotionally impactful. Honestly, it could have been interesting if his wife were still alive and he had passed away and this was like a tribute to him or something. Like, I think there could be something interesting there that they could have done with that as well. So those are my thoughts that I would like to bring to the table.
I was just thinking the same thing, is that he shouldn't be there for this whole thing. You know, he needs to have passed, because I think there's something about the way that we emotionally react to seeing that allows us to zoom out. Like, we immediately zoom out and think about the whole of this person's life when someone passes, and we think about their legacy and the choices that they made and the key moments in their life. Like, we are immediately catapulted into the stratosphere and can see the whole picture of this person's life so so with so much more clarity than if they're still in our presence, in our midst. And so I totally agree. I think he needs to not be there. And it allows then us as the viewers to zoom out and think about our 3-hour experience and how much we've walked through, but to see the beauty of what he has created. I was also just thinking about how perhaps, I mean, this film is not interested in levity of any kind at all, but I do think it like needed something for us to breathe a little bit, and and balance the tones of some of the big heavy emotional scenes. And I wonder if having more moments of awe and wonder at his architectural creations would have allowed for us to have those moments of levity, of space to breathe, of changing our tone as we're experiencing this film, but then also really feeling the same sense of like, he is enduring so much, but man, look at what he's creating, you know? I was thinking a lot about one of my favorite scenes in this film, which is the reveal of the renovated library and the sun streaming through the curtains, these genius library wall shelves that emerge out of the walls and so smoothly and with such elegance. Like that moment was magical to me. And I think had we had a few more moments of that littered throughout the rest of the film as he's working on these big projects, it would have added that moment for us to breathe, first of all, which we really needed. But then two, we as the film goer have now gone through this whole movie and felt the weight of his craft and his genius. We get so many scenes of him like on construction sites, which is great. Those are important too. But I think seeing like his architectural renderings and just the film kind of with this gaze of just like oozing over in slow motion of the wonder of his creation would have maybe helped us also get to that final moment of like, yes, it was all worth it. When you are that gifted, you have to figure out a way to birth it into existence, even though it's going to cause you a lot and cost you a lot. So that's something else that I think would have made this film stronger. It's just more architectural moments of awe and wonder for us to just revel in.
Mm, mhm. Yeah, yeah, I agree. I also loved that library scene. Ugh, it's so magical. It's just it's absolutely perfect. And you can tell that the film is trying to do that throughout. You know, he has his giant model of this building that he's building, and we get to see all different sides of the model, and he's trying to like show people what they're doing with the model, but it's not quite as effective. And I also feel like that ending when they're all running around this building looking for Harrison, I almost wish that we had had a moment before to kind of see inside the building and experience that awe and wonder. And then we can see it in this totally different light of being almost this like horrific place to be in. And I think that that would have been an interesting juxtaposition to see this building that has been the focus of so much of this film in an entirely different context than we had seen it previously, and that might add some just interesting things to think about. It might not really like add to the overall thesis of the film, but it might have provided some really cool visual contrast throughout that. I don't know. I found myself wanting to have seen the inside of the building in a different light before we're seeing it as the search party is looking for him.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I think you bring up a really good point around like visually, this film is very squarely in one tone for so much of the film too, and kind of a little bit more diverse stimulation. I mean, like on a physical level, just like different color palettes, different things for us to sink our teeth into visually would have also, I think, helped make this feel fresh, punchy, exciting, momentum forward as we are going through all of the different like sights and places and moments throughout this film. There's just it's so brown and gray and dark and colorless, which is definitely fitting for the era that this film is set in, but also we just need a little more moments to have a moment to breathe out of that and then come back to it. And it actually packs a bigger punch when we have had moments to recover.
The the other thing that I was thinking about while watching is that I think this is, like, 2 steps away from being a horror movie. Like,
Yeah.
I think we can get there. The score is basically already there. It's so ominous and eerie, and I ate it up. I loved this score. I can't wait to go listen to it on its own. And then there are some shots where while I was watching this in the theater, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this could be straight out of an artsy-fartsy horror film," and I am here for that. So, like, there's the one part where they're all at the party, and they all go tracking up this huge hill, and it's this really far away shot, and you can see the silhouette of the hill, and you can see all the silhouette of the people, and I'm like, "Yeah, that is them going to a place where they're gonna be murdered or something. Like, this is out of a horror film. I'm ready." And then at the end, when they're in Italy with all, like, the marble quarry that they're at, straight out of a horror film. Like, I think with some tweaks here, we could have an artsy-fartsy horror film on our hands, and I'm very interested in that version of the movie.
Actually, that would be so dynamic.
Right? It would be so interesting.
Wow.
I'm here for this.
Yes. Yes. And because this is horrifying, you know what I mean? It's very
Exactly.
perhaps inspired by Jordan Peele around
Mm,
being able to
mhm.
showcase the way that our societal dynamics are horrifying and being like stalked by this man that has all of these evil and twisted perspective and desires that have are slowly being revealed, and like the presence of them is very apparent from the beginning of the film but doesn't become fully realized but until the end of the film. Yeah, I like this. Ugh, you're onto
Right?
something.
Right? I think it would be fantastic. And
Yeah.
even, like, some of the architecture stuff, you can keep all of that in there.
Yeah.
Like, it still works. We have, I don't know, 65% of this artsy-fartsy horror movie already here. Like,
Yeah.
we're more than halfway. We got this.
Yeah. Give us some, like, slow shots of these, like, wood paneled, dark wood cherry paneled hallways and, that dinner scene that they have where
Yes.
Laszlo goes over to Harrison's home for the dinner party, and they're, like, waxing poetic together, everybody. But, like, to film that in, like, with all the suspense and thriller and this loaded language and kinda the menacing way that they speak could be really thrilling and
Mhm.
exciting. Yeah, you're onto
I mean,
something.
you just have to pretty much re-edit it, I would think. Like, 'cause you already got all the pieces. The way that it currently is it's all of the subtext and undertones and, like, you're cringing internally, but you could just probably edit that a little bit, and it would be a little more horrifying, and that scene is done. Like, we have the bones of this horror movie of The Brutalist.
Yeah.
It'd be
Yeah.
so fun.
And what a great title, for a horror movie, The
Right?
Brutalist.
It works!
Oh, yeah. That's an interesting thought. I love where your brain went. That's really cool. Okay, so how would we rewrite the epilogue if this is a horror movie?
I don't know that we would have one.
Ah, yeah.
Just lop it off,
Just
because this horror movie wouldn't be 3.5 hours long, so we'd have to
yeah,
cut a bunch. So, it'd probably be
yeah.
about 2 is what I would think. So, yeah, I don't know that we would have an epilogue.
My cynical brain is like, let's do an epilogue where like the forces that play are still here. Like they are
Yeah,
lurking, just
yeah.
something that like a little montage of the way that like those perspectives, aggressions, thoughts in people at this time, like were not
Mm,
dispelled. Like,
yeah.
but that's
There's
there's ways to do it.
yeah, 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 yeah.
The essence of like, okay, we survived this episode, but the monster's still lurking under your bed and in your closet, you know? Like, okay, we made it
Mhm.
through once, but like we have by no means defeated the foe. No, ma'am.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. There would need to be that little twinge there at the end. And obviously, Jordan Peele does this just exceptionally well. So we would need
Agreed.
honestly, we would need his help
Yeah.
because he could figure out a way to do all of that, probably without an epilogue, would be my guess. Like, there's I'm sure there's a way that you could insinuate it
Yeah.
without needing to jump into the future.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But some little, like, there's a moment of release. Like, okay, my gosh, we've survived, or we haven't, but we're in the aftermath of that. And yet,
Mhm.
one shot, 1 or 2 shots is probably all you need to be like, oh man, this is birthing. Like Harrison's son, the next one, the successor of
Mhm.
this ideology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, we got it. This is great. I
Yeah.
love our little horror movie.
Yeah. One of the things that I was thinking about a lot through this film is kind of the representation of what Laszlo and Harrison symbolize in the film industry and in art in general. But Laszlo has this raw, incredible, natural talent that is so like unfathomable, and you can't not notice it. And his brilliance, I think, is on full display, but he needs someone like Harrison who has wealth and money and resources to notice and fund and really draw out the talent and give a platform for it. And the constant tension and fighting between the two of them, I was like, wow, you zoom out and you're like, wow, this is the forces of art and commerce perfectly at play here. And so, kind of the meta commentaries of that whole dynamic between the two of them, I think is really, really interesting and fascinating to think about in the context of how these artistic talents unfortunately really rely on the forces of capitalism and commerce to be fully realized, and oftentimes it comes at such a high cost to the talent, and how much they have to give and bend and listen and yield is horrifying. So I thought that they were both such figures in this film and such opposing forces, but also feel like such a accurate representation of a lot of the dynamics that exist within our current societal dynamics too.
Oh, that's so interesting. I hadn't thought of that, but you are absolutely right. And it makes me think of how sometimes you'll see like a director will do like this one's for me, this one's for them, and like
Mm,
how there will be these really, really like famous commercial projects, and then the same director the next movie will do this like artsy fartsy indie just wild creative expression thing. And it's very interesting how people navigate these situations, because we live in a society where you need money. Like,
mhm,
capitalism is a thing, and it is a business, and movies and art and all of these things, they are artistic and creative and all of this, and yet there is a business aspect of it that can't be denied. And so it's interesting to see how people navigate that very difficult reality and see which way they go with this. And there's a lot of ways to handle it, and
mm.
we see what Laszlo does, and it's volatile and comes back to bite him a number of times. And I don't know, according to his niece, it was all worth it.
Yeah, yeah, and with that lens of viewing this film and what unfolds, it's a pretty like cynical view too of who ultimately like quote unquote wins, because you just see how much Laszlo has to yield throughout the film, or needs to yield to Harrison, and the way that commerce and the forces of capitalism and business and commerce are cold, and they're aggressive. They have no regard for, the human being on the other side of all of it that are at play here, and will just continuously seek to dominate at all costs. And, Harrison being a representation of that is like quite fascinating as a characterization of the forces at play there, which is it's about results, hard and fast numbers, and there's a lot that gets swallowed up in the orbit of that. And I guess I guess the movie's maybe a little bit more balanced. It's not fully cynical because the realization and recognition for Laszlo's brilliance is there, which is honestly, like, you could argue a pretty hopeful perspective as well, which is that, like, when you are great enough and when the brilliance cannot help but shine through, like, it will be noticed by the masses, which is quite hopeful. There's, like, probably an even more cynical version of this movie where, like, Laszlo is attempting and pursuing his art again and again and again, and it just gets completely swallowed up by the forces at play, and no one he's still an unknown immigrant in America by the end of at the end of his life that has no recognition and no impact and no legacy. Like, that is probably the most depressing and cynical read of the ability for art to ultimately shine through. But so I guess I will walk back my statement that this film is perhaps cynical in a lot of ways and yet balanced with the hopefulness that the brilliance of an artist will come to pass and will come to really be noticed.
I I almost would prefer a slightly more cynical version of this film, I think. Like,
Yeah,
the the
true.
I the idea that he, like,
Makes
went
it.
on to do all of these great, beautiful buildings, and he is world
Mm,
renowned and beloved by many and all of this, like, I don't know, man. It almost would have been nicer if it was like this small gathering and it's a bunch of it could be like architecture fans and stuff, but because his style is very niche. I mean, I love it, but like not everybody's gonna dig what this dude created. And so if it's a little bit smaller and he didn't get this worldwide fame, but maybe he just got like regional fame or like or like a subset of the architecture community is like, "Oh my gosh, we love your stuff." And and with that smaller group loving his work, the
mm.
destination is still worth it, because he was
Oh,
able to
yeah.
exercise his craft. I don't know. I feel like that might be a little bit more impactful if his renown was smaller.
Mm, yeah. Or going back to our, like, he should be absent from the epilogue because he died already.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that he never gets to see the impact of his work. Like, it is
Ooh,
appreciated much
yeah.
later, which I think is a really melancholy and bittersweet reality that exists, which is that so many artists aren't fully appreciated in their time, but their legacy and the full recognition of how they impacted the industry is realized after they die. And to be able to depict the emotions of that for us as a viewer, I think would be really neat, to see this artist that, like, gave everything, literally gave his life to this, didn't see the fruition of it in his lifetime, but ultimately it was worth it. And look at how much he has impacted the craft. So I guess TLDR is we just need him to die before the epilogue happens. Uh,
So
so that's what
sorry,
we're advocating
Laszlo.
for out here. Yeah.
Poor guy. He's been through so much, and we
We're still
also
just
need you
like,
to die.
yeah. We're like, I know you've been through a lot, buddy, but, like, you also can't see the impact of your work. Sorry, because
So sorry.
it's true.
Yeah.
We just want the good things for him. I'm so
We
sorry to
do.
Laszlo,
I really did.
as
Like
we wish for the worst for him.
I was rooting for him in this film. Like I wanted him
Yeah.
to be okay. I wanted him to feel fulfilled. I wanted him to be able to like build a good space for him and his family. Like I was rooting for the guy, but I think for that epilogue, either we need to completely change how that's done, or it can stay like that and he just needs to be dead.
Yep. Yeah.
Sorry,
Nice.
buddy.
Love it. Yeah. Okay, other big things we wanted to mention about the Brutalist before we wrap.
Oh my gosh. Like we haven't I don't think we've touched a single thing on my notes because there's this movie is 3.5 hours long.
Yeah.
So here's something that I for sure wanted to bring up. It's two little things that I would like to contribute
Okay.
to this
To the
episode,
discourse.
to the discourse. They're not important things, and yet they were what my brain focused on. So one of them is and I do this. I weirdly pay attention to which, like, if people are right-handed or left-handed, I pay attention to what their dominant hand is. And throughout the film, Laszlo's changes. And sometimes he will be like sketching or writing with his right hand. And then there are two scenes that I noticed. One is like when he's sketching, I think it's that like weird chair where he is holding a cigarette in his right hand and he's sketching with his left hand. And then also before the intermission, he's writing a letter to his wife and he's writing with his left hand.
Mm.
And I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, are we saying that this dude is ambidextrous? Because if that's what we're doing, I needed that to be clearer because I was just confused and going, what is this?
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I wonder,
Yeah.
like, because a lot of really brilliant creative people, like both of
Mm-hmm.
their brains are so active. Like, was that an intentional choice or truly like a accidental, just from a filmmaking perspective, they just went with it? Yeah, that is fascinating. I wonder the thought that went into that.
The world may never know, but I noticed it and I had
Yeah.
questions. So I
Yeah.
needed to bring this to the table and have you have questions as well.
I have questions that we will never know. But yeah, that's an
Exactly.
interesting observation. I had no idea. I was trying to collect all of my brain cells actively throughout this film because they were
Mm.
running away. So we had none left.
That that's fair. That's fair. I think the way that I stay engaged, and we've talked about this before, is that
Yeah.
I will hyperfixate on things.
You know,
Uh,
whatever helps you. I'm so glad because you stayed through this whole
you
thing,
did. You did.
and I'm glad you had a little treasure hunt for
Hmm.
this movie.
I sure did. So the other thing that I will treasure hunt in films is pinky rings, and there are two in this film.
Please tell me
So
Harrison has one or
he
Harry.
sure does.
Okay,
They
good.
both do.
Oh,
So
wonderful. Wow. Great data. Those are fabulous data points.
so yeah, my theory of if a white straight man in a movie wears a pinky ring, he is a villain.
Yeah.
These two data points support that
Like heavily support that.
heavily. Yeah.
Man, this theory is really like it has been prominent over so many years, and I am
Hmm.
continuously shocked each time at how consistent it is. It's so good. You have
Yeah.
uncovered like a theorem of the universe, I feel. You
But
know?
it's only in the context of film though, so it's not really
True.
that
Yes.
useful.
For all of the people out there that are looking at their fingers and being like, "Oh, what does this say about me?" This does not apply to
No.
reality at all.
No.
It doesn't apply to like family heirlooms too. I know that that's a thing for some like
Hmm.
wealthy families, especially like royal families or whatnot. They pass down something or other like
Mm.
signet rings and whatnot. So it does not apply for that. But in all other circumstances, you are a villain.
It most of the time it's true, not all the time, but a lot of the time this theory
Wow.
holds up, and
It's
I'm
crazy.
I'm so pleased that this fits into
Well,
our data set.
well done. The laws of the universe are being slowly uncovered and supported
Excellent.
thanks to
We
Sarah
love that.
Cowan and our continuous potting where we watch so many movies and collect all the data
Hmm.
points.
Yep. It is
You
useless information, and yet I am
know
fixated on it
what?
every time.
I need to know these things so that I am clued in while watching movie who to trust and who not to trust. How am I supposed to navigate the world
Telling you,
without this
man.
information?
You look out for that pinky ring.
Yeah. Wasn't there something with like Apple having a contract with studios that villains couldn't
Yes.
have Apple products in
Yeah.
frame with them? Something
I
like
don't
that,
think that that's the thing anymore, but yeah, that was a thing for a while.
which is
But
fascinating to think about too.
yeah, it is interesting because I mean, it's true though. Like what we watch shapes how we interact with the world, and so if we're seeing villains using these products, we might start to associate these products with villains.
Yeah. Yeah.
It makes sense.
Hmm. I think that you need to submit this theorem to the You Are What You Watch book And our in our some of our recent episodes, we were talking about this book called "You Are What You Watch." Go listen to it. TLDR is it's basically like data journalism when applied to films and the impact of films and how it shapes society and our psyches. And this is prime content. Okay, this is prime data sets that need to be studied deeply. But we are faithfully collecting them into our little basket here.
hmm I'm just doing my public service is really what
You
this is,
are.
you know?
You are. It's very important.
Be looking out for a dude with a pinky ring only in a movie, but just keep your eye on him.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. Well, I am glad that we have ended our episode on a lighthearted note because we really needed it. You know, the pinky rings discussion
Ooh.
is our epilogue, and we're ending on a high.
Yes, yes. And less than 3.5 hours. So
You know what?
that is
Yeah.
also our gift.
Look at that. Look at that. We might even end here within an hour, which is fabulous.
Wow.
We
I believe we can do it.
have demonstrated restraint, and I'm proud of us for it. Okay, well, this is our review and discussion of The Brutalist. You can find it available out in theaters. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Movies and Us. Our name sums it up. We're all about movies and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories, so everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts about The Brutalist. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at Movies and Us Pod, or email us at moviesanduspod@gmail.com. We will be back very soon to discuss the film Sing Sing as we continue our journey to the Oscars, covering all of the Oscar-nominated films that we are interested in. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll talk again with y'all very soon.